and this diagram shows that. Now, it's a bit complicated and it's a little bit more information than you probably need, but it gives you the idea. So what you've got, anything with a plus is going to increase breathing rate and depth. Anything with a minus is going to decrease breathing rate and depth. Something that's got a plus and a minus can have, you know, either effect. So if we go from the top, what you've got is your higher brain centres. They could increase or they can decrease breathing rate, because that's the voluntary control you've got. So you're thinking about your breathing now. If you want to breathe faster, you can. If you want to breathe deeper, you can, and that's this part, your higher brain centre, that's in control of that. Here you've got other receptors, so responding to pain or emotions and so on. They can act through the part of your brain called the hypothalamus, and again they can increase it or they can decrease your breathing rate. What you're looking at here, this overall diagram, this thing here, is all found in your brain around about this area. Okay, just so you're clear on what we're actually looking at. I'll just get rid of that. Okay, so where did we get up to? This is your respiratory centre here. Sometimes we see it called pons or the medulla. We said medulla oblongata is where we said that it was. And these are the chemoreceptors that we were talking about. So this is the aortic arch, actually, which is coming out of your aorta of the heart, and you've got chemoreceptors in there. Now they're going to feed information about the amount of oxygen, the concentration of oxygen, concentration of carbon dioxide, and the concentration of hydrogen ions in the blood. And they're going to feed that back to the respiratory centre, and ultimately a decrease in oxygen, an increase in carbon dioxide, or an increase in hydrogen ions is going to increase the rate of breathing. And rightly so. If you've not got a lot of oxygen in your blood, you need to breathe more, you need oxygen. Here you've got central chemoreceptors, where they're within the medulla oblongata, and again the same thing, they're responding to chemicals in the blood. Increased carbon dioxide, increased hydrogen ion concentration, increases breathing rate and depth. Also, we said this, receptors in your muscles and your joints. You start using your muscles, start stretching them, start moving them around. That's going to feed back to your respiratory centre, and that's going to make you start breathing deeper and faster, so you can supply the muscles with the demands of oxygen that they need. Things having a negative effect, well, stretch receptors in your lungs. So when the lungs are fully inflated and stretched, that's going to stop you from breathing in anymore. So that's going to cause you to exhale. And also irritant receptors we've got here, they'll have a negative effect on it. So if things in your lungs, there's receptors that are sensitive to certain chemicals in the air, they could also reduce your breathing rate. If you've got things in there that are causing irritation or an inflammation, they may well slow down your breathing rate and depth so that less damage is done. Again, there's quite a lot of information on there, so if you want to pause that and have a good look at it, just do so. Just take all my doodles off so it's easy to see. Okay, you need to be aware of something called partial pressure, because they can use this in the exams. What partial pressure is, and if you do sport, you might have already seen this, but it's basically a measurement of how much of a contribution a gas has to the atmospheric pressure. Now, atmospheric pressure at sea level is about 101 kilopascals. I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, about 101 kilopascals. You already know that about 20 to 21% of the air at sea level is oxygen, and overall that contributes about 21 kilopascals to the overall atmospheric pressure. So what we see is the partial pressure of oxygen, pt2 is how it's symbolised, at sea level is 21 kilopascals. You probably know already that as you increase in altitude, that partial pressure is going to decrease because there's less oxygen available to contribute to the pressure. Again, you need to be aware of that terminology because that does come up a lot. There's if you want to flick in your book, page 170, there's a task in there, or at least a diagram in there showing you the partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide in alveolar air and in the blood. It's worth having a look and just familiarising yourself with that. As a result of ascent, so climbing mountains and so on, you can suffer from altitude sickness. I don't know if anyone ever has done before. I certainly have, to an extent. And the reason for that is the partial pressure of oxygen decreases as you increase in altitude. If you are at high altitude, because there's less oxygen available, the concentration of oxygen in your blood can get quite low, and so what you get is a stimulation of your ventilation centre. If you remember from the chemoreceptors in the aortic arch, they're gonna sense that there's less oxygen in your blood, so they're gonna cause you to breathe faster and deeper, which overall is what hyperventilation is: breathing too fast and too deep, more than you need to. Breathing quickly and deeply reduces the concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood. As a result of that, you're going to get an increase in pH. So because you know that carbon dioxide reduces the pH or decreases the pH, makes the blood more acidic, if you're getting rid of carbon dioxide by hyperventilating, the pH of your blood is going to increase, it's going to become more alkaline. That ultimately can disrupt the ventilation centre, and you get what's called apneas, where you just stop breathing for periods of time. Really desperate situations, you can get mountain sickness, or you can get His, cerebral edema, or pulmonary edema, and obviously you're in a lot of trouble then. I don't know if any of you went to Kilimanjaro, but often people who climb Kili or other mountains very, very quickly do suffer from acute mountain sickness if they're lucky, but then obviously His and HAPE if they're unlucky. So you can see some of the symptoms down there. I mean, I've suffered with this myself when I was spending time at altitude, and that was only like 2,000 meters. But I had all of these symptoms in the first few days of being there because, well, I guess I just wasn't prepared for it. Dehydrated from travelling when I arrived, and just felt nauseous all the time. I didn't vomit, thankfully, but insomnia, I had some terrible nightmares and all these things. Dizzy, and just couldn't really. Just felt very, very faint, tired, couldn't really do anything, just felt really dreadful. So I couldn't train for the first few days, and my body slowly got used to it, and then I was alright after that. Obviously, if you are, I mean, I was alright, that was in a town, but if you are climbing, you haven't got time to adjust, then this is when these two start to kick in. So cerebral edema first, and then pulmonary edema. If you are suffering from those, I mean, the only way to deal with it is to descend. You've got to go back down. If you don't, you can see the results: coma, and death. Ultimately through suffocation. I've got a quick video for you to have a look at, and you'll see some of the effects on there, or at least an explanation of it. It looks cheesy, but it gets the point across. Here we go.
Altitude sickness.
Contrary to popular belief, altitude sickness has nothing to do with physical fitness. No amount of exercise can reduce the likelihood of becoming ill above 5,000 feet, which is the altitude generally accepted as the lowest threshold for illness. Therefore, it's important for anyone who plans to do some mountain climbing to know the symptoms of altitude sickness. Common destinations of high altitude include Cusco, Peru, and La Paz, Bolivia. Symptoms will usually commence within the first day or two of arrival and include headache, fatigue, nausea, rapid heart rate, loss of appetite, dizziness, and difficulty sleeping. More serious symptoms include severe shortness of breath, confusion, clumsiness, and even a loss of consciousness. The gold standard of treatment is descent to a lower altitude, but healthcare providers also use diuretics, steroids, and occasionally a medicine called nifedipine to control symptoms. Here are a few tips for avoiding altitude sickness. Acclimate yourself to a higher altitude by slowly ascending the height over several days if possible. Don't sleep at altitudes more than 1,000 feet higher than the previous night. Drink lots of water, eat a high carbohydrate diet such as pasta. Don't do any strenuous exercise or activity for the first few days after arrival at high altitude, and have rest days planned if you are ascending further. Avoid medications such as tranquilizers, sleeping pills, and narcotic pain relievers because they can decrease breathing rates and lower blood oxygen concentrations. Avoid alcohol because its effect is magnified at high altitudes and may lead to dehydration. Remember that altitude sickness can be a life-threatening condition.
remember. Okay, so just a quick review of the altitude sickness part. So symptoms are there. Again, if you want to have another look at them, if you didn't catch them from the video, have a quick look at that, pause that, jot them down, whatever it is you need to do. This is only a small section, but I feel like it's the kind of thing they might ask you an apply question on. So do spend a bit of time, make sure you got your head around it, obviously ask any questions in the lesson. So to finish up, outcomes. So for C grade we had this, so being able to define tidal volume, residual volume, vital capacity, forced expiratory volume, inspiratory. Minute ventilation we didn't do, but you could probably guess what minute ventilation is. Being able to interpret a spirometer trace, well, we had a look at that. Hopefully you're able to identify each of these things on that spirometer trace, and then explain how breathing volume, breathing rate is controlled. That's ANA start, and it is challenging that because you've got a lot of new terms linking to the other unit in terms of your brain and so on. So that is quite a challenging part. But that's it for today. Obviously the usual test on this at the start of the next lesson.